And we're back! After a week off, 7-second summary is returning, and I hope you're as excited as I am. For anyone who's new, here's how it works. I'm going to go through every team in the Overwatch League in alphabetical order and tell you my thoughts on how they did in the past week. The catch? I have just 7 seconds to talk about each team. As I go through, there will be 5 components on the screen. The first will be the logo of the team that I'm talking about, and below that I'll put their overall match and map scores, as well as their overall placement. Then I'll have the results of their games for the past week, and my thoughts, just a transcript of what I'll be saying, and finally, a score overall from 1 to 10. When I'm done, I'll take my teams with the 3 highest and 3 lowest scores and talk about them in more depth and tell you why I thought they were so high or so low. To end off the video, I'll take a look at next week's matches and recommend one match per day and why I'm excited for it. If you can only watch one match a day, these are the ones you watch, in my opinion. It's also worth mentioning that if a team didn't play this week, I won't be talking about them. With that out of the way, let's get started. Tough games this week, but it's nice to see you getting creative. It feels like they're getting more easily countered. It's worrying. Welcome to the mid-tiers! So, when are these changes coming? I feel like they're so much better than this. Improvements are improvements, I guess. This is getting kind of ridiculous. You're slowly gaining my trust again. Easy schedule, sure, but 6-0 is 6-0. You can win 2 games? The possibilities are limitless! You lost, but there's no reason to panic yet. So, is this a worst of the best kind of thing? A record-setting season? They're just dominating, establishing themselves as a top tier with either roster. The first 2-0 of their existence. Was Stellar really that impactful? Wow. Yep, business as usual. Yep, business as usual, but with Sleepy.
Defeat.
Yeah, I know the Fusion haven't been close to the worst this week objectively, or even in the bottom 3, so you can just yell at me about that in the comments if you want, but I really wanted to talk about them this week because if I'm being totally honest, I personally am disappointed. I've been noticing a trend here with the Fusion. As of right now, they're sitting at 8 wins and 5 losses, good enough for 5th place overall, which isn't bad, definitely. But let's take a look at their losses so far. They've lost to Florida, Dallas, The Shock, London, and NYXL twice. Of course, the Shock game being in the playoffs. So, you take away the Florida loss, of course, which has been pretty heavily debated over time and could have happened over a couple of different factors. So you take that away, and you start to have trouble finding quality wins for the Fusion. And by quality wins, I mean games that the Fusion won against teams that they were either the underdogs against or viewed as evenly matched towards. I think the best win you can give them is their win against London on day 1, but while London have improved a lot since that day, I haven't seen the same from the Fusion. I've been seeing a lot of the same mistakes from players like EQO, Sato, and Carpe in the GOATS composition, and I've talked about them at length in other videos, so I won't go into detail here. I've also been seeing a strange stubbornness against experimentation in the meta, which is weird considering how the Fusion were one of the more out-of-the-box teams in Season 1. I'm not saying go full Chengdu, but I'm just kinda surprised that they don't seem to trust Carpe and EQO to do their things. What has resulted of it seems to be a worst of the best situation. They're in this weird limbo area where if they're against a team that they're heavily favored to beat, they'll often put them away fairly easily. However, they will struggle a lot to play against teams that most consider to be even or greater strength. We can talk all the time about how playoffs Fusion is different, but as we saw in the finals last season and the semifinals in the stage playoffs, that only gets you so far. If the Fusion want to be considered as a legitimate contender to win this whole thing, they need to be able to pull off some wins against these top teams.
Victory.
Let's talk Dragons, because like I mentioned earlier, they were able to pull off their first ever 2-0 week last week. Now that they're sitting at 3-2 overall with the Justice still ahead of them, it's looking very likely that the Dragons will finally make the jump from 0-40 to playoff qualifiers. What happened to get them there? I feel like the Dragons have continued to improve more and more as the season has gone on and Gamsu has had the opportunity to gel with the rest of the roster. However, in the last few weeks, I feel like we've really been seeing an emergence of an extremely underrated backline in Luffy and Koma. I've been pretty critical of them in the past, but they've really turned into a solid backbone for this team, and I would rate them as a top 10 support duo in Overwatch League right now. One of the most exciting things about the Dragons this week was with the season debut of Dia, the team's last remaining Chinese player on Anubis. While I think most would agree that Dia missed a stronger Zarya on the Dragons overall, and it doesn't hurt that he's Korean like the rest of his team, Dia pulled out a very strong Ashe for Anubis defense. And while so far in Overwatch League we've usually seen Widow played over Ashe for her superior scope damage, we saw Dia taking full advantage of the tools in Ashe's kit. When we're trying to dive on him, pull off the shotgun, shoot him away. Arhan and Genji getting a little too close, throw a dynamite in his face. It's worth mentioning that it was a great team effort overall to full held the Outlaws, especially after getting full held, and credit has to be given to players like Ding, Youngjin, and Koma. But the fact that Dia was able to come in and play so well with his all-new team after so long just felt really good from a fan perspective, and it also must have felt really good for Dia to get his first Overwatch League win that he, actually played in. I'm excited to see how the Dragons use Dia and his impressive skill set as the season goes on and he gets even more comfortable.
Defeat.
Man, what an interesting turnaround for the Defiant. When you looked at teams that probably were going to have a much worse record in Stage 2 than Stage 1, you probably thought about the Reign because of their losses, or maybe the Fusion with their much more difficult schedule. But I don't think many thought the Toronto Defiant would go from 5-2 to 1-4 so far this stage. That cohesion that they had before just doesn't seem to be there now, and that makes me wonder just how much impact Stellar had on them. Honestly, when Stellar retired after Stage 1, people didn't really give it a second glance. I mean, people were already freaking out about the Fran, and I'll be honest, when to me, Stellar felt like one of the most invisible players who had a starting spot on an Overwatch League roster. Now, of course, this is coming from someone who has never watched Stellar prior to the Overwatch League, but that was just my thoughts. He was just there, a decent break, but then he left, and when the Fusion picked up M37 to replace them, we began to miss him. Now, before I move on, it is worth mentioning that so far, the Defiant have faced the Justice, their one win, the Uprising, the Fusion, the Fuel, and the Shock. That's not an easy schedule by any means, but when that graphic showed up with I'm37's Zarya stats so far, and last and 20th was littered all over the graphic, it's hard to justify. Ivy was a very good Zarya for this team, and I wish that we had some sort of explanation as to why they shifted him over to Brig so that I'm37 could play Zarya. If they really hate I'm37's Brig, that's fine, I just want to know why. I'd personally love to see a big stream of an analyst looking at the Defiant before and after Stellar to see the differences in their play, especially the effects that it's had on Yakpong. I feel like his play has been a lot less confident recently. And or he hasn't been getting the support from his team that he used to get. So far, their plan has not been working, and even with a tough schedule so far, you have to be winning at least a few of these games to be considered as contenders, and right now, the Defiant are struggling to justify themselves as even mid-tier.
Victory!
There's been a bit, and I'd like to emphasize a bit, of drama going on around the Seoul Dynasty recently, as they made a few change-ups to their starting roster. From the Dynasty, we're used to seeing two different lineups. One with Fissure, Michelle, Jexay, and Fleta that they've been using most of the time, and one with Marvel, Zinba, Topi, and Fitz that they've used on weaker teams and on certain control maps. However, last week against the Fuel, we saw Marvel play instead of Fissure, and Fitz playing instead of Fleta, two fan favorites, of course. And the obvious question here is why? The Dynasty haven't been playing too bad at all with their original roster from our perspective, so the only conclusion is something else must have happened. Thus began another wave of Fissure is toxic rumors, but here's a counter question. If you could, theoretically, change out players at will and still perform at a very high level, therefore making you much more difficult to prepare for, why wouldn't you do that? We've seen teams like the London Spitfire last season try and use this strategy and ultimately fail, but the idea is there, and if you could pull it off, it would be a nightmare. At least with a team like the Titans, you come in with a plan. Sure, it might not be a great plan, but you can at least walk on the stage knowing what you think is your best path to victory. But with the Dynasty, if you're trying to prepare for 3 different possible rosters, how do you even do that? I believe that the Dynasty might just be the team to pull this off. At the very least, it's the closest that we've seen to a team pulling this off so far. Now, sure, that might just be a hunch of mine, but if that really is the direction they're heading, people better watch out.
Defeat.
Well, how do you feel now, Outlaws fans? I can't say that it isn't tough for you right now. I feel like a lot of people in Houston were in a bit of denial when they finished with a respectable 3-4 record in Stage 1, but I'll be honest, the Outlaws just might be the worst team in the league at this moment. I just feel like where a lot of other teams have improved, the Outlaws have stayed the same, and maybe even a little worse at this point. We've seen the news Arhan on that break position for the second week in a row, and while I can't tell you I'm the best at analyzing good versus bad break play, it hasn't been that magic piece that got the Outlaws on their feet again. Look, it just doesn't look great as of right now. Pop quiz, how many maps do you think that the Outlaws have won so far this stage? The answer to that question would be 1. That would of course be Busan against the Titans, but still, 1 map. Now to be fair to the Outlaws, they've only played 3 games so far this stage, but look at what's left. The Dynasty, the Spitfire, the Fuel in their home stadium. It feels like the most winnable game for them right now is going to be the Charge, and I'm just not sure how I feel about that. There is individual talent on the Outlaws, Linkstar, Dante, Muma, that much is indisputable. But playing individual talent just isn't enough anymore. Every team has individual talent. It hasn't been enough all season. The Outlaws are falling fast, and I feel like without a major change in their mentality, I'm scared that they're not going to stop.
Victory!
This week, the San Francisco Shock took the all-time record for the most maps won in a row in the Overwatch League. I mean, what more needs to be said? All you need to do is look at their map differential and see that giant 20-0 staring at you straight in the face to realize just how much of a powerhouse this team is right now. Could it be possible that we could be seeing the first ever completely perfect stage without even a drop map? Sure, the Fusion and the Dragons are both teams with the potential to take maps off them, but a white-hot team like the Shock will be extremely difficult to take down at this point. I feel like a big part of their success right now has been with their success running Baptiste comps. Whatever Mickey was for Brigitte last season, I feel like we have to say that Rascal is the same thing for Baptiste, at least so far. The amount of value that he can get from his immortality fields is just insane, and he can put down an amplification matrix and melt a team on his own just because of his own crazy mechanical skill. Other than that, the Shock have just been dominant across the board. You look at their starting 6 and it's just like, who's the weak link? They don't have one. Ever since that super bad graphic, the dude has been wrecking just about every main tank in the league. Troy Hyobin is second in the league in grabs eaten and is just an insane diva overall. I've already gushed about Sinatra and Violet, and Moth is finally getting the recognition that he deserves. In my opinion, of the quote-unquote Big 3 in the Overwatch League this season, the Shock are the scariest at this moment, because they're showing a hunger that not many other teams are showing right now, and they just keep getting better and better.
Victory!
What are you? What are you? I am so confused. I don't get it. Defran leaves, okay, I get it, you lost a big piece, and now you suck. Dako is supposedly benched for attitude problems. You are in just a complete mess, and you become the Valiant's first win. It's all terrible, the Reign are going 0-21, but then Dako comes back, and you perform out of your minds out of nowhere to give the NYXL their first ever loss in the regular season. Wow, what a breakthrough. Everything's been figured out, they're gonna be a powerhouse, but then you lose to the Charge right after, a team that was on like a 7-match losing streak. Well, I don't get it. What's going on? What dimension is this? I want to go back. As far as next week goes, I'm going to take the obvious answer and just go any game with a fuel in it. This is it. The Dallas home games, the first ever Overwatch League regular season games to be played outside of LA. This is a huge step for the league's development, and I can't wait to watch it. I'm hoping that the sold-out crowd will provide a similar amount of enthusiasm for their home team as the Friends did for their World Cup squad. Okay, fine, that's a lot to ask for. Any French viewers out there? You guys are insane, and I love your enthusiasm. But honestly, fan enthusiasm in general is one of the best parts of Overwatch League, in my opinion. And I think watching the Fuel play in their home stadium is just going to be one of the coolest things. I just can't wait. And imagine the Battle of Texas that's going to be going on Sunday. It's going to be just as good as the Battle of LA's in Blizzard Arena, except the venue is like 10 times bigger. This is going to be awesome. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. What do you think about last week's games, and what are you looking forward to for next week? Let me know in the comments. As always, if you're new around here and you enjoyed this video and want to see more, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. I make Overwatch League content every week, and I would just be thrilled if you took a little bit of time out of your schedule to watch it. Until next time, though, that's all from me. Don't get tilted.